Welcome to Discussions of Dragons, the show where we discuss Dungeons & Dragons. I'm your host, Resident Player Character, and I'm joined today by Resident Dungeon Master. Today's episode will cover homebrewing spells, transitioning spells from previous editions of the game, and our own personal experience testing these homebrewed transition spells. Or transferred spells, rather. Still getting back into the swing of things. But first, how are you doing today, Resident Dungeon Master?
I'm doing well. It's been nice getting back into the groove of things, and we're going to talk about some D&D.
Ready to talk about it?
Oh yeah, we've got a couple of really interesting past few sessions with our group that we play with. We actually leveled up twice.
That is true.
Since the last time we did an episode, which is amazing considering we went from 3 to 5, which is a lot of those lower level classes kind of double in power in some cases.
Yeah, 5th level is really that milestone, isn't it?
Yeah, it's where you go from that type of campaign, that early stage levels 1 through 5, transitioning into 6 through 10, that next step in the adventuring tier, where you get to fight the more deadly, scarier monsters, groups of monsters that you thought were hard enough just solo back when you were levels 1 and 2.
You might be getting down in there in the hit points towards 0, but now it's for good reason, not just because you got hit too hard.
I mean, now you can take a hit and you can actually give bigger hits. I mean,
yep.
I did a couple of calculations for how much damage my monk can do in 2 rounds now. It's upwards of 80 damage. Just and then that's with advantage on attack, and that's average damage too. That's advantage on attacks. I've got a concentration spell up. I'm using my full action and bonus action, etc. Giving bonuses to my allies, healing, harming, stuff of that nature. And that's just me solo. Excuse me, not including my allies. And I was playing a monk. I went from level 4 to 5. I actually had an increase from my hit die, my martial die.
Yep. Went
from 1d4 to 1d6. And I know at level 5, a lot of casters get a milestone where their cantrips actually double in power. I know you have access to Eldritch Blast, right?
Yeah, I reflavored my Eldritch Blast, and that's really something interesting for the topic of this episode. But I did make it something else, but it has most of the same function.
Well, yeah, now you get you get an additional die on your damaging cantrips. Martial classes get an extra attack. I just got an extra attack. My martial die also went up for my punches, or my melee attack, 1d4 to 1d6. Get into the nitty gritty, kind of off topic, but it's just we had a really good milestone. But with that milestone, we had some decisions. We did have some decisions. At level 4, I took the Shadow Touched feat for intelligence, so I could get a boost to my intelligence and get a couple of new spells. And Resident Player Character here did a feat at level 4, and then obviously you're getting some more stuff at level 5.
Yeah, for my feat, I chose Eldritch Adept, which just gives me another.
Yeah, you're just stacking on the Eldritch Invocations.
Now, usually Eldritch Adept is for non-warlocks, so they can get an Eldritch Invocation.
Yeah, the 5th edition system. What they're doing now is it used to be we're veering more away from the classic. You have to be this race class combination.
Yep.
You can't really toy around with ability score improvements nowadays. With the book that they're going to be coming out with,
we were just talking about this earlier.
Just came out. I'm so excited to get it when it becomes a standalone, because it's just really hard to get right now for cheap.
Yep.
So I'm gonna wait for a little bit, maybe find an online copy, look at it.
Yep.
And as soon as that comes out, that's really the next step into transitioning into 5.5. What was it, 2024?
Something like that.
Where they're going to just not rehaul the system.
Overhaul?
The 5e. Yeah, they're going to overhaul some bits of it, make it all a bit more streamlined, fix some things that people have problems with.
Just polishing it up.
Yeah, because 5th edition is the most popular edition of D&D by far, and just 5.5 is just going to be that update patch that a lot of games sometimes need. So, onto the topic of new abilities and new spells. We actually,
speaking of older editions,
yeah, we came across some spells that we homebrewed that are in our plug it all. Not trying to advertise anybody.
They're just spells that you homebrewed in this website they use for
in
D&D
this
stuff.
This popular D&D website that we use, and we can homebrew our own spells and put them in there. And I just had some drafts, but I think I left them on a public setting or something, or somehow you have access to them.
Yeah, I'm seeing them pop up in my spells that I can pick from.
So you think they're official spells, when in fact they're just
things that you made.
Yeah, they're just things I made.
And they're cool spells. I thought some of them were official, and I was like, man, that sounds really cool.
Obviously, I didn't know if they were balanced or not, or if there was already a counterpart that existed. I was just trying to make something new and creative.
For your own use.
Doesn't have to be overpowered. Doesn't have to be super innovative. Something brand spanking new.
Trust me, anything's better than True Strike.
Yeah, but
just to preface, we're talking about homebrewing our own spells, and just for a refresher for anyone who may be new to the program or maybe has not remembered our way earlier episode where we talked about homebrewing. Homebrewing is a thing in this game where you basically just make your own stuff out of your own mind, sometimes with aspects from the game.
You're making something new, for the game, so you can use it. I will just talk about one of these spells.
Yeah, give an example of your ambidexterity one.
Ambidexterity. It is.
Well, first define what that word actually means.
So ambidexterity is where you can use both of your hands. A common example is that you can write left-handed and right-handed. Some people are primarily right-handed, some people are primarily left-handed, but if you're ambidextrous, you can use your right hand or left hand for common things.
Well, just like right. My mom is slightly ambidextrous. Hard word.
I'm resident DM, you're resident PC, she'll be resident NPC.
What?
Mother.
Okay. Clarify your joke more, what do you mean?
I don't have to clarify, I just have to cast ambidexterity.
Alright, cool.
I think, I can't remember exactly, but basically it toyed around with proficiencies and allowed you to do certain things with certain items. That way
you talked about alchemy and leatherworking and stuff like that, just what are the craft skills?
I think it either sped up or lowered the cost of crafting certain items. And because I really like the crafting aspect of D&D, I want to...
You don't see it a lot.
No, because the way it's published is it's kind of a clunky system. It doesn't, it's not very clear how you make things. So I just find online things that other people have homebrewed, and I want to use that in a future campaign that I might run. I'm still currently doing a rehaul, a complete overhaul.
That's not a rehaul.
Or not a rehaul. I'm doing a complete overhaul. In fact,
you're only keeping the name.
Keeping the name, and I'm keeping the idea of what I'm reforging the ideas that I wanted initially that I was too naive to really put time and energy into properly because I didn't have the information and the experience that I do now. I mean, this was me. This is my first DMing campaign. This was my second campaign in 5e, and the first one that I had ever DM'd.
My first one that I ever played.
And I was brand spanking new. Didn't know all the rules. I barely knew one class, but I just wanted to roll with it and see where it went. And being a yes man to all my players didn't work out so well, but it taught me very valuable lessons, which we are trying to
impart on you.
So impart on you, the listener, and just really talk about. And then that's what this is. It is a discussion about the game. And
way to get really meta there.
Yeah. So back on the homebrewing spells, eventually you reach a point where you're like, I want something new, something creative my character to do. What do wizards do when they're just sitting around? They
make spells.
They just make spells, but it ends up being the exact same spells that are already published. If I want my character to try something new, ambidexterity lets them. I think it was a second level spell. If you have a spell that you're homebrewing and you put it on a level, let's say a cantrip first and second level, those are the easiest ones to homebrew, in my humble opinion.
For balancing purposes,
For balancing purposes, because you have a lot of really good options. You go to the higher levels, you're going to run out of things to compare it to, because I don't want to make something on par with calling down a lightning bolt or a fireball to start off with. I want something on the power level of firebolt or prestidigitation.
Lightning lore.
Really, like things that don't do a lot of damage but have some minor magical effects.
Yep.
And what you can do is you can draw on these simple ideas that aren't actual spells yet, that you can have just lying around. So I thought, all right, well, there's a lot of things with D&D for like people having two-handed weapons or dual wielding.
Just a lot of mechanics.
Some things with crafting, things like that.
And you want to make something that would help out with that.
Exactly. And as a caster, this isn't something that you just cast on yourself. Maybe you could cast it on a friend. And I thought
cast it on a quest giver that you have to make them finish a sword they're making for you faster.
Exactly. Just really, and I think I started it at level 2. I did like a version 1.0. Obviously, you can like mix and match and change. And I thought, all right, well, what does it do at higher levels if you use a different level spell slot? Maybe you do person, things like that. So I just wanted to say, hey, how can I improve something that my character is lacking with a brand new spell? That's what I did ambidexterity. Then, before I found the spell Witch Bolt, which basically does, it's a first level spell, and it is a ranged spell attack, and you do a random type of damage.
Witch Bolt is cool. I like it.
I wanted to make something called Wild Elemental Blast. I wanted to focus on that old school D&D. I just want to focus on one element kind of thing.
I think I remember reading that spell again.
That is my creation. Because
you tricked me like 3 different times.
What I made sure to do was put like version 1.0 next to my spells.
Yep.
Which none of the published D&D spells on this popular D&D website have.
If it's an option, why do none of them have it?
But it's an option for me. The published spells don't have it.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what sets them apart.
Okay.
And some of my wording is different than like.
I can tell you worded some of them because you clarify a lot of things.
Yeah, because it's a brand new spell. I don't want to leave out any details because if I need to test it, which I do.
You want to know what you need to take out.
Exactly. So Wild Elemental Blast is basically, it's a cantrip. It's low damage.
The cantrip is a 0th level spell.
Yes,
by the way.
you don't need to use a spell slot. It is something that the most basic of magic users can use. It is a tier higher than commoners, but it's a tier lower than where their real magic begins. Cantrips are
literally.
Well, cantrips are like the practice magic. These are the very beginnings of
We'll get to practice magic, but go.
They're the very beginnings where your spells come in. A firebolt, a little
prestidigitation,
a little like spit of fire, prestidigitation, making sparks or like an odor or a
cleaning
sound.
off your windowsill dust.
Windowsill, mending, taking 2 pieces of torn fabric and you cast mending and focus on the spell for mending.
Cantrip, a lot of cantrip. I'm not going to say all of them, but a good number of them are used for basically just convenience and housekeeping, essentially. Be used in a more dangerous fashion.
I mean, if I have, my tennis shoes right now, they're in rough shape. We got some
cast mending on them, they're brand new.
Cast mending on, yeah, and then cast prestidigitation, and then clean.
Yeah. And then cast firebolt, and they're stood on the ground.
Exactly. But these are like the basic things. I could do cantrips with basic things.
Basic things.
I need to get the spell called tongues.
I was gonna make that joke. I just cast tongues on you.
But
I saw a spell that was what was it? It was tongue tied. Where it's basically just you cast on someone and they start talking gibberish for no reason.
Was that a version 1.0?
Probably.
I think we did something that like affected casters in such a way
where they were also confused as to why they were doing that, like saying gibberish.
Something like that. Just weird, wacky spells that are kind of like. Okay, let's take the spell Blindness Deafness. So we'll get back to Wild Elemental Blast in a second. It's a 2nd level spell, causes a condition, blindness or deafness, if they fail a save. Well, maybe another 2nd level spell, you could incapacitate somebody or like knock the wind out of them, or you could stun them for a round. Instead of stunned is a more powerful condition, but just lower the time, keep the spell level the same. Keep the save DC the same because you're using that same whatever, and then you're good to go. Maybe because I think blindness deafness lasts for a minute. Stun condition could last for 3 rounds, and then there you go. You could like be sapping the vitality out of somebody's body, and then they just like petrify up.
That Harry Potter scene.
Yeah, like the Harry Potter scene, exactly. If they fail the save.
Yep.
So they have a chance of succeeding, which you have a chance of obviously that failing for the spell slot. Like, you either have someone who's saving against a spell, or you have a you're going against their AC, their armor class. I just want to keep it on. I want to compare it to other spells of the same level, or other similar effects. That's how I really want to make my spells. So, cantrip, Wild Elemental Blast. I wanted it to be weaker than Firebolt because I wanted you to have to choose between Wild Elemental Blast and Firebolt. If I wanted to focus on fire, I just take Firebolt. This one, I think it does like 2d4 fire damage, and then you can ignite something that can be ignited, like rope or paper or something. That's not
so it's like Firebolt and Prestidigitation somewhere in between there?
It's a worse Firebolt. It's a worse, like lightning spell.
Is it like a better Druidcraft?
It's a spell that you don't have to choose 4 different elemental spells. You can just choose one, but it's random.
So like Witch Bolt?
Yeah, it's like Witch Bolt. I don't have to choose 5 different spells to cover different damage types. I can just choose Witch Bolt and then have them all technically covered.
So
but
in the event that you
random.
need something, you have a 25% chance of getting it.
Exactly.
Instead of just always having fire.
But all of those spells, but if I needed fire, it's going to be less effective than if I just chose a fire. Because the magic for this Wild Elemental Blast is, it's going to be, this is the theme and the history behind it, it's primordial. You're calling upon just primordial magic, not specifically plane of earth, plane of fire, plane of water, plane of air, etc. You're not calling upon a specific area of magic you're just calling on primordial magic. You're just calling on straight primordial elemental magic. That's why it's random. Because maybe you're thinking, I'm calling upon the plane of air or fire. No. You're calling upon the plane of chaos, where it's
the elemental chaos.
Elemental chaos. That's why it's random. So Witch Bolt is an upgraded version of this. That's why it's a first level spell. This one is dimmed down. This one is the baby version. And
the Avatar, master of all 4 Witch Bolts.
Well, and then what you could do is you can make this at like controlled elemental blast. You can
maybe roll to see if you can control it.
Well, you maybe not roll to see if you can control it, but let's say you roll a percentile die, or you roll a d20, you're like against your own spell save DC, and then you can choose the effect, and then it's appropriate first level. Yeah. So let's say it's a first level spell. What's a first level fire spell? Like Burning Hands?
Firebolt? Oh, there's a cantrip.
Yeah, Burning Hands.
I thought Burning Hands was second level. Is it first level? That's pretty good.
Magic Missile is also a really good one. Magic Missile is one of my favorite all-time
classic spells. Because it doesn't miss, spells. Blah, 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 we got it.
Well, it doesn't miss. It's force damage, which is not a lot of things react to. But if you Magic Missile somebody and they have a shield spell up, it automatically just deflected. Not deflected, it just doesn't work. Yeah, exactly. And then their shield spell gets up for a while. So Magic Missile is bad against other casters, but it's great against monsters. Especially monsters that have really high ACs or have proficiency on saving throws, etc. Because it's just that guaranteed damage, and when you upcast it, you're just getting damage.
Yeah.
And then I like the idea of introducing new spell scrolls.
Oh yeah.
Because then it's not something permanent, it's like a little test thing.
That's what I'm doing basically with runes, my campaign.
Okay.
I'm not making them like things inscribed in the ground, like immovable things, and making them like handheld things inscribed to rock, stone, or metal. We talked about this. Where you can carry them, and it's like basically a spell scroll in the form of like an ingot, a magically empowered ingot of something.
Well, you could have it be the item spell scroll, but then it's flavored to be a rune.
Yeah.
And then when you're actually saying it's like, I'm casting the spell, you're doing whatever you need to do to the rune to make it cast, and then the rune gets eaten up as part of the spell component. Or not. Maybe it's a reusable one.
One of the first things I fool around with for my campaign was something called a Rune of Permanence.
Well, what if there was an additional clause you made to some of your spells for spell scrolls, that there was a chance, a small chance, albeit, that the spell scroll wasn't used up. And I like that, because it's a little
bonus.
Well, okay, so back on crafting. Let's say you craft a spell of a certain kind where it takes like 50 gold pieces for a cantrip. You doubled the cost and made it out of a magical parchment that made it so some of the time it actually didn't get eaten up. So you could actually save money in the long run. And then just little things like that, like changing around homebrewing, let's say, spell components, 4 different spells, so you could minutely alter the effects. Let's say let's say fireball, right? What if you change the component slightly, made them a little bit more harder to get, or if you threw in something else that increased the radius, or lowered the die down to a 1d4, or a d4 rather than a d6.
Double the distance.
Double the distance, or instead of 8d4, you do like 16d4, and it's a very concentrated fireball. Or you do like a fell fireball, and then have like a special effect of this fire overcomes the resistance to fire immunity. Something like that.
That's exactly what I'm thinking for all my stuff in terms of remaking spells or like adding new spells. Just turning the laws of magic on their head.
And so it's still the fireball spell, right? Because we're still talking about homebrewing spells, but we are just slightly altering what already exists. That's a great way to start making your own spell.
The spell still shoots a fireball.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how far, how big, how devastating, what color, what damage, you know? There's a lot of variables in homebrewing that you can just replace things in.
And you can go the math way of having these spells tested, doing the math and the averages, and just like homebrewing monsters.
Trying to make sure they're balanced to some degree.
Exactly, and you want to say, all right, I have a party of 4 level 3 adventurers, they should be able to handle a CR3. What is a CR3? And I'm just getting into the nitty gritty of homebrewing monsters, because obviously you are as well. You've got a lot of strange creatures on your world.
Oh yeah.
I have a lot of creatures on mine that I want to be similar to things that already exist, but are flavored for
the place they exist in your campaign.
Birds around the world are all different shapes, sizes, and colors. Yeah, exactly. They eat different things. They behave differently. They're adapted to different climates.
Yep.
Same thing goes for fish.
Yep.
Same thing goes for land animals.
Goblins,
right? I actually I was toying with the idea of different tribes of goblins, and then they actually take on an attribute. I think we already talked about this a little bit before. But just like that, take something that already exists. This is a great way to start. Take something that already exists, change one part of it, then change like another one, then change another one. Next thing you know, you're going to have your own creation that you really like amalgamized from a bunch of different things.
And it is wholly yours, but at the end of the day, it's a goblin.
Exactly.
And that's what's cool about this game, where you are able to like be modular with the things you put into it, and it still be completely yours.
How about goblins with 4 arms, which makes them really good tinkerers
and climbers.
So they're mountain dwellers.
They probably have, maybe if they're forest dwelling goblins, they have a bunch of like treehouse societies.
Exactly.
They're good crafters and they're good climbers.
What else you could change?
Because normally goblins are cave dwellers, right, or forest dwellers.
Really anything.
Well, goblins normally you find them just in like wilderness areas, caves and woods.
I would say the forest.
But if they had that kind of like, imagine having 2 more arms, all the stuff you could do, right? Even for a goblin, and I'm gonna call them lowly, because goblins are pretty lowly in a lot of lores.
Yep.
They exist just like on the land. Nobody really likes them too much. They're just out there in tribes. If they had 4 arms apiece, you know, think about all the dynamics of their culture and their construction and their magic that would change.
Exactly.
You could hold 4 swords at once.
Or 4 little daggers.
Yeah.
4 bags of gold.
You can probably cast 2 spells.
You do extra actions.
Yeah. That's also an interesting thing, how many arms a character has, determining how many spells they can cast at one time.
Maybe not spells, but I would say like definitely actions.
What if it was like one of those 2-headed ogres from WoW?
I like that. Because see, that's another interesting dynamic. Take an Oni, a magic casting giant, give it 2 heads, and so it has doubled spell count. And let's say it's like 1 more arm, give it like a tail for like a tail attack or something, add scales to it. Now you've got like this reptilian giant magic user 2-headed thing that can cast multiple leveled spells at you in a turn and take reactions and have legendary actions. Like that's a beast right there.
We thought about that in 8 seconds?
Yep, I just made that up on the fly. And you see how easy that was? Now, I don't have the exact stats.
That's when you go researching into the stuff that exists. Find an ogre stat block, right? Double up the things that would involve its senses. Give it some extra buffs to armor if you're going to have the natural armor from the scales. If you're going to have a tail, give it a tail attack and its multi-attack.
Maybe take away a little bit of dexterity.
Oh yeah,
because you've got 2 things trying to you've got 2 things trying to fight for control. Or you could do more dexterity, less strength, stuff like that to balance it out.
Probably more intellect.
Definitely more intellect.
Less charisma. 2 heads.
Maybe less charisma, but proficiency in intimidation. Stuff like that.
Or deception, because you don't know which head to believe.
One of us tells the truth. One of us lies. Both of us will attack you. No, but the way you're gonna get all of this through and all of this concrete, and you're gonna want to use it more, play test it.
Oh yeah.
Just say, hey.
Or even just talk about it like we are.
Just talk about it. Go through a couple of mock scenarios in your head. Try to. But at the end of the day, I really think just talk to your DM and be like, hey, I have this homebrew spell that I would like to try, or you could try some of the unearthed arcana. That's literally like stuff that's not published. It's homebrew. It's meant
like remakes
to be
of the existing stuff.
It's meant to be play tested so that the owner
they can see if it's passable into being published.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was going to say this earlier. There are examples of quote unquote homebrewing spells in the lore itself.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite spells that you are sick of hearing about from me, Tensor's Floating Disc.
Yeah.
Tensor made that spell. It's not just a thing that existed among all wizards. The wizard Tensor, who has a bunch of lore behind him, he made the spell Floating Disc.
It was a solution to a problem that no spell had. It was a solution to a problem that no spell could solve at that time. And so
that's
what
wizards do.
They made a new spell for it.
Yep.
That's exactly how it is.
And you'll see in the game, there's a bunch of spells named after their creators. Bunch. Like,
Tasha's Caustic Brew.
Yeah. Tasha's Hideous Laughter.
A Charlatan Stride.
Exactly. All that stuff. Like, a Charlatan's a dragon, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't even need to be a wizard. But also, speaking of spells that we talk a lot about, right? I'd like to share a spell that I made that I recently wrote into this website that we use, and we have talked about before. And I think it's a really interesting take on homebrew, because this is a spell that's not a remake of an existing spell, but it still fits in perfectly with everything, I think, and you know what it is. It's Praxis.
Yes, Praxis.
So the word Praxis is basically just a synonym for the word practice. It means just like a practice version of something, like a praxis exam if you've ever taken one, you know? It's just like the tutorial version, right?
Yep.
Now, I thought this was a cool name, first of all, and I just write down cool words that I think of and try to turn them into D&D ideas in my notes app on my phone. But for Praxis, I believe what we talked about and what my original idea was is that this is a cantrip that allows you to cast higher level spells without the damaging and harmful effects, right?
So elaborate for our...
So let's take Fireball, for example, like you did. Fireball is a spell that shoots a giant fireball at somebody, right? Yeah, just fire damage, destruction in a huge radius.
Throw a grenade, basically.
Yeah. If you Praxis cast a Fireball, so what would entail doing that is, on your turn, you use your bonus action to cast Praxis, and then you use your action to cast Fireball. So you Praxis cast Fireball. And basically, that just gives you the entire... Also, I'll mention that Praxis, the cantrip Praxis that I made, is an illusion spell. So basically what it does is it makes an exact illusion of what that spell would look like with you casting and like it leaving your hand or whatever,
so do you have
without
to use
the damage and harm.
Do you have to use your bonus action and action to completely do Praxis?
I think this is one of the discussions that we had where I argued that it probably should be a free action, but you were like, it probably would be better as a bonus action.
I don't think any spells would be good for free actions. I think that just... I mean, the utility of the action economy for free actions would be something quick, like stowing a dagger.
This is what we talked about, where I thought it would be balanced to have it as a free action, because if you think about the nature of the spell, it's completely harmless, right? And given Prestidigitation is not a free action, but still, Praxis just gives you an illusory duplicate of a spell of how it would look if you cast it fully, but without the damage and harm. So I said it would be a free action because any intelligent enemy, not that you're constantly fighting intelligent enemies, but any intelligent enemy would realize that the spells that you're casting aren't damaging them, and they're going to catch on, you know? They might not know exactly what's happening, but they're going to catch on that there's some sort of magic happening that's allowing them not to be harmed.
Right? Well, they're looking at a fireball, but they're not feeling a fireball.
Yeah, and after the second time, the gimmick's over, pretty much, you know? Either that or they're going to think they're immune to fireballs now, which is another interesting aspect of it. But to just clarify, casting Fireball with Praxis means that you have every other sensory attribute of the spell besides the damage and harm. So if you get hit by a Praxis fireball, you still feel heat and you still see light, but not enough to blind or burn you. Right? It's not bright enough but it still has the exact same appearance as a fireball. Just the sensory stuff is toned down to a point of not being able to hurt you, right? And of course, the lore version of the spell would be used for basically just wizards practicing spells to see if they're actually getting the incantations off right, you know?
Kind of takes me to just like a training montage of like a wizard practicing spells, or like a Doctor Strange kind of moment, or like a Harry Potter kind of thing. That's just what I think of when I think of Praxis. Now this is a conversation we've had, because you want Praxis as a free action.
I did. It could be a free action, but I think bonus action also works. But you mentioned that why would you have to use your bonus action and your action? So elaborate on that.
So you were saying you want to Praxis as your bonus action and then Fireball as your action?
Yeah, because just Fireball takes an action, so I figured that would be a good substitute just for example.
So you Praxis as a bonus action to see how people would react to your Fireball.
What do you mean?
So just Praxis. Now here's the discussion here for folks who are just me talking to a resident player character. So Praxis as a bonus action. Mm-hmm. I'm a wizard, and I'm fighting a group of goblins.
Yeah.
I Praxis my Fireball, and I throw that Fireball. Sound, light, a little bit of heat, but nobody's hurt. Now, I have the reaction, be like, oh god, oh, this guy can throw fireballs. Maybe as my action, I say, hey, I like make an intimidation check, and I say, look, real things coming your way, like that's a warning shot.
So you're saying the entirety of Praxis should be just a single bonus action that implies casting the buff on the spell that you're going to cast? And then casting that spell as a bonus action, no matter if it's an action or not, because you're taking away the damage?
I think it's having spells as bonus actions are really powerful, or cantrips as bonus actions, because there are rules stating you can't cast 2-level spells in a turn. So you cast
this is what we discussed, where Praxis technically doesn't break that rule because you're not casting the spell.
It's a cantrip. So cantrips ignore that rule. Leveled spells. You can't cast more than 1 leveled spell on a turn unless something specifically states, "Hey, I'm breaking this rules as written thing in the core rule books."
And this is why.
Because let's say you use your bonus action to cast a leveled spell, and then you use your action to activate a magic item that would cast a spell for you. I mean, by proxy, you are casting the spell, but it's through the magic item, so you might be able to find loopholes through rules, talk to your DM about it. Maybe they want to change some stuff or agree with it. I'm saying rules as written. Praxis feels like an action, but you turn it into an illusion thing.
Literally no harm, no damage possible.
No harm, and you have to be able to cast that spell anyways. You have to have that spell prepared, or you have to have that spell in your spell book, or just straight up known.
Yep.
Those are the only spells available for you to practice.
If you don't know Fireball, you can't practice cast Fireball.
Now, what that's interesting is because the lore of being able to practice things, you practice it before you actually go and do it. But in this case, you already know how to do it.
Because you practiced it before.
Now, I will say, it does make sense the opposite way. Because nowadays, we are given so much knowledge and information, and it makes sense. We are given the how-to for a cooking video, right?
Yep.
We are given the steps and everything.
You can fully see how to cook an entire thing before you even get the ingredients.
Exactly. So you know how to do it. I know how to do mac and cheese right now.
Yep.
But I'd like a little bit of practice before I actually go and serve it to somebody. Which is what the praxis is. And
if you could just literally press to digitate all the ingredients in an illusory form out of the air and make the mac and cheese to see if you did it right, wouldn't you do that? Without wasting any money on the ingredients or making a mess?
Sounds good to me.
Exactly.
Or burning something and then setting off your smoke alarm. So I agree, praxis, great concept of a spell. And there's the clause, you can't copy illusion spells.
Yeah, it doesn't work in illusion spells. What would you do? Because illusion spells don't have damage or harm associated with them.
Exactly. But then your argument is, why use praxis when I can just use another illusion spell? Well, minor illusion is something small. It lasts for a specific amount of time, has its own
Praxis is specifically for damaging and harmful spells and magic, so you can cast them harmlessly. Well, just in general, for anybody. But more specifically,
I mean, this is going to be like a test of your...
Praxis would be like a professor wizard spell. Like, hey class, here's how you do fireball. Shoots it at a kid. There's nothing no damage.
Yeah.
But that's how you do it. Like,
but also I think like this would be good at copying evocation spells specifically, maybe some necromancy spells, but like divination spells, maybe it's just I'm saying
damage and harm are the big caveats here.
I think it takes away the damage and harm, and I'm not trying to like commandeer a spell here. I'm just saying, like just for the crowd.
Yep.
I'm not saying, hey, this is a bad idea. I'm just saying, kind of like some what ifs.
Because, like clarify.
Yeah, just like clarify. So it takes away the damage and harm from spells, but that doesn't mean necessarily it has to only be spells that harm or damage, and that you know at the time you're casting. It just takes away the damage and harm. Because let's say you're trying to teach someone to cast divination. You could practice a divination without actually being able to see through the divination, but you still get the effects of, oh, he's going through divination or something like that.
What would those effects be?
Like
what does divination do?
You get to track somebody. Maybe I'm thinking of scrying.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a enchantment spell where you get to like, look at something or gain some information.
Now, here's the thing. If that has a visual effect to it, Praxis would work on it. If someone sees you casting that from far away, they think you're scrying somebody and you're not, you know?
Exactly.
You don't waste a spell slot, you just use it as a bonus action, you know? Like, if someone's spying on you and they think that you're contacting somebody, that might dissuade an ambush later, you know?
Now, remember, guys, this is an illusion spell, so you're supposed to be using it to trick people.
Oh, yeah.
Or you can use it to show others how things are done.
Intimidation, tricking people, teaching people.
Good role play. It's got
faking
combat.
Somebody out in combat.
I think good spells, like very good spells, have combat utility and non-combat.
That's why you see a lot of cantrips having all of those.
Praxis is a great example of it. It's a great spell. I think you found something really, and there's no reason why I can't copy other cantrips. So
if they're damaging, yeah, you can copy a fireball and a fireball.
Well, I'm saying, but it doesn't have to be a damage. What if it's
we make a good point. Where if it's like scrying, no damage, but if it has a visual effect.
You can have any spell be any visual effect you want. You just have to state, I'm practicing this spell.
Most spells have visual effects. That's what I mean. You can make it look like whatever you want, but you have to make it look like something. You know.
Here's a question. What about like dust? It's a cantrip.
Is it visible?
It's a breeze. It's a wind.
What is it, like visible wind?
Not that I think. Wind's not specifically or like overtly.
Is there sound?
You probably hear a little bit like.
Then yeah, you can practice cast it. If there's any sensory thing.
But maybe it's like a lighter wind than an actual gust.
Well, there wouldn't be any wind. There would just be the sound. Fair. Or maybe there would be like just a breeze instead of like an actual pushing over gust. Now, Praxis billion uses. You can look at each individual spell and figure out if it's yes or no on that, right?
Well, you can go through 8 different variations, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to set up like a scenario where I'm playing a wizard, like one of your worlds or whatever. It doesn't have to be specifically your campaign setting. I just want to say, hey, throw me in like a dungeon or something, make like a mock, like a one-shot. Let me kind of explore, maybe have like an NPC at my side, go through a dungeon,
see how it works.
Just to show like how Praxis works, things I can use it for, maybe in combat, not in combat, stuff like that.
Yep.
And then you get a little bit better feel for it. But just in this short like 5-10 minute discussion about Praxis, we've uncovered more than we've
previously talked about
by ourselves or like over text. Just sit down, write it down,
have a discussion with your DM today.
Like, argue with somebody. And I'm saying argue with somebody in the...
Constructive argument. Discuss.
Well, no, there's no winner or loser, so it's not a debate. It's an argument. You're trying to reach a conclusion together.
Yep.
You're trying to make something better for both of you to use so you can both enjoy your game better.
And it's funny because, ironically, this is the name of our show, and we've had discussions like that as well.
We've had discussions.
We've had a discussion spanning 2.5 years about floating disc, but we're not going to get on that right now.
We've had a discussion that has had people at each other's throats about. We've been very, very mad at each other before.
It's not mad. It's just like I'm saying something and
frustrated.
You're saying, but yeah, we've recovered from that since.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're trying to share our ideas. We're trying to be like vulnerable because we think we have something good, and we trust the other person enough to give that harsh, truthful criticism.
Being creatively vulnerable with your DM or your players is a good way to get stuff done.
Yeah, because you're a writer. You create.
I try to be.
You're creating your own world.
Yep.
I've created my own worlds. I've played in different campaigns than you. You have a different experience as a player than me.
And there just comes like moments where you lay all your notes out on the table and be like, "What do you think?"
Well, at the same time, Rick, I do a lot of D&D Forgotten Realms setting stuff.
Yeah.
I personally have not read a lot of the Forgotten Realms lore.
I have.
You, on the other hand, yeah, you have.
I read it all the time.
Exactly. And you actually dissuaded me from reading some specific parts of it for like
Your own sake.
Yeah, for my own sake, just so I don't spoil it.
Yep.
But the thing is, people are gonna have different opinions. People are gonna have different viewpoints
And you just gotta combine them.
about the spells that they want. Some people want to play D&D differently.
Yep.
Some people want to play D&D the same. We've kind of have a mutual agreement how we want to do things.
You gotta homebrew your experience too.
There's some things that I think are completely overpowered. You think are balanced, if not underbalanced.
And those are what the discussions that we have are, where floating disc comes into play. But we should have a floating disc episode. We really should.
That's not a bad idea. I think that'd be a really good.
Easily talk about that for like an hour. Now, there is one more thing I do want to mention involving Praxis, just really quick.
Yeah.
I had an idea earlier today for a 9th level spell called Malpraxis.
Yeah.
And we no, different thing. We talked about Malpraxis before.
But this is a different version.
Just same name, different version. I think this is
just
better
like
than
my
whatever you
campaign.
thought.
well, on my campaign thing, it's Eigenar. You can use that name if you want. I don't care. It's Eigenar. Original setting. 10,000 years in the future after a cataclysm.
Yep.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yep.
That's why I get to keep the name.
Just keeping the name.
Yeah. And then the survivors actually
Survivor.
twist the history so that it's like, oh, this is actually what happens in the big cataclysm. So you forget about all the lore and the campaign settings and everything. That's where the continent's different for the maps. It'd be a different part of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Eigenar is just the continent, not the world.
You just like the name.
I just like the name.
You can name it anything.
Yeah.
So
Chum bucket.
What?
Chum bucket.
The chum bucket? No. Pretty sure that one copyrighted. I keep saying that wrong.
Copyrighted.
Cool. So, real quick, Malpraxis, 9th level spell. It does the exact opposite thing of Praxis, where it removes any detectable sensory sensation of a spell, but still keeps the damage in effect.
So an invisible,
undetectable,
non-verbal, undetectable fire, where you're just standing there and all of a sudden you're roasty toasty.
Yep.
86 damage.
Yeah. But still,
so
only for spells. What if it's for like any other spell that you don't know? Just make it opposite of everything.
Like, it's kind of so 9th level spell. You're going on wish level power.
Yeah, literally god power, which I think makes sense for this.
It's like Finger of Death, but better.
Yeah. But imagine, like,
imagine Meteor Swarm, but you don't see it.
Malpraxis cast.
Malpraxis Meteor Swarm.
That's terrifying.
All right, we need to. We gotta go. We gotta write this.
Yeah. So yeah, even that, you can make opposites of your spells. You can make anything you want, basically. So go nuts. That's the moral of the story. But yeah, I think that covers it for now. We should definitely have another one of these. We can. I thought of this while we were talking. We can have an entire thing called the Praxis Chronicles, the Praxis series, where we break down each spell and see if it's Praxis worthy.
Yeah, you could have like 5 sheets of paper, like 5 pages of just notes on Praxis.
Like you go through all the necromancy stuff, go through all the abjuration stuff.
Or you classify each school of magic into detail. Because we talked about earlier things that aren't schools of magic that are magic, and then you gotta get into that.
That's what we talked about earlier today.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, future episodes might talk about Praxis more, might talk about more spells. But I think that covers it for now. You can catch us again 2 weeks from when this airs on the Pirate Media One SoundCloud, and I think some new places coming up, but that's yet to be announced. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Discussions with Dragons. We will catch you later.